Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our first virtual tasting of 2026, and a really excited one too, because I'm very, very, very pleased to welcome our producers from New Zealand for the first time. So we have Moore from Moore Wines in Marlborough, and we have Alastair Bailing NW from Mount Beautiful in North Canterbury. We also, of course, you know, as always, have Amanda doing the presenting job for us today. Thanks again very much, Amanda, for joining us. Amanda has all the wines, even though she's in Mendoza. She's got the wines ready to taste with you. And as always, everyone, if you could please, if you've got any questions as we go through that you'd like to put to Ant or to Alastair, then please use the Q&A function. They can't see you or hear you, but they know that you're there. So any questions you have while you're going through, even if you've just got a comment about the wine, that'd be fantastic. Otherwise, without further ado, I will leave you in the capable hands of Amanda and Ant to start with, and then we'll see Alastair later when we get on to tasting the Mount Beautiful wines. Anyway, enjoy, everyone.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you. Well, it's lovely. I'm very excited when Condor first said that they were introducing New Zealand wines to the portfolio. Obviously, I'm a big champion of South American wines, but New Zealand has to be one of the most beautiful countries. And wine regions around both different islands that I've visited. So, Ant, as we kind of kick off, I wanted to ask you a bit about how you ended up in New Zealand, because you're actually Australian, aren't you? So you've been in New Zealand for 20 years. What is it that first attracted you to come to New Zealand?
Yeah, I'm actually originally an Aussie. I've been here since 2002 when I came across for a job at Isabella Estate as chief winemaker. For me, it was real. I mean, I really wanted to work with cool climate wines. One of my first vintages was in Oregon, making Pinot and Chardonnay and Pinot Gris, and I really liked those. That just the freshness, the fact that you can make wine without adding acid, without adding anything. Really, we don't have to add anything or subtract anything. You can do it all pretty naturally, and for me, that was a huge attraction. That was the sort of winemaking I wanted to do. So I was fortunate enough to get a good job here and came across, and then started my journey here. Really. It's been awesome.
Excellent. And you've made wine all around New Zealand in multiple different regions and pioneered certain regions. What is it that attracted you to make your brand in Marlborough?
I mean, Marlborough's sort of, where it's all at really here. I mean, the weather's ideal. I mean, it's fantastic. I mean, yesterday was about 25 degrees, sunny, not a cloud in the sky. We're harvesting at the moment. Yeah, I've made a bit of wine from Hawke's Bay and quite a lot from Central Otago, and I still make wine from Central Otago. I like the Pinot from down there, but Marlborough's got some really quite nice diversity in sort of sub-regions, and so I've developed 12 vineyards in my time here, which I probably enjoy developing vineyards as much as making wine, if not more. Actually, I love just finding sort of unique little sites and trying to develop them and get them up into production. And so, yeah, I've seen a number of sub regions here and a few areas that no one was in until I got there, and show people you can make grapes there and that you can make decent wine from them and that sort of thing. So, in fact, I've just done another one in the last 2 years in a on the way to a place called Picton, which is it's a harbour. And so it's quite a maritime influenced vineyard. Everyone said I was crazy doing it, but I'll get my first fruit out of there next week. Actually, we're harvesting it and it looks fantastic.
Ooh,
So yeah. But
excellent.
yeah, New Zealand's been an awesome journey. So it's great.
Super. Well, we look forward to hopefully trying some Picton fruit maybe in 2 years' time, or maybe a year's time, actually,
Yeah, exactly.
if it's Sauvignon Blanc.
It
Can
is.
you tell us a bit about, because as I understand, you have three main regions that you use for your grapes at the moment in
Yeah.
Marlborough. So Awateri, Waihopai, and Wairu. Correct me if I'm saying any of those
Yeah. No, that's pretty
incorrectly.
close. That's pretty good. um, yeah, I
Can
mean
you give us
we've
a little
got
bit about why you've got these different regions and what
yeah, and so
benefits each of them bring?
yeah, we've got those three. Plus, we also take some from the Upper Wairau, which is up in the mountains, which is another sort of microclimate. I think the good thing is in Marlborough, there's always different events that come and that can sort of wipe you out if you're not careful. So if you're diversely spread, you always are going to get really good fruit in some way, shape, or form. So there's that aspect. Just in terms of like you can get hit by frost, the weather can just be against you in certain areas. I mean, the valley's not very wide across. It's only a couple of kilometres across, but one side of the valley's dry, the other side's lot wetter. So it's really valuable to have a number of sources of fruit. It keeps your risk down. The other thing that it really does also is it gives you blending options, so you can really make sure you. We make wine. We keep them all separate, all the parcels from each area. They're all made individually styled. So I'd make probably 70 or 80 ferments. There's quite a few. And
Oh,
then we
wow.
just pick because I make a lot of wine for other people and other wine companies. And then so the stuff that goes into the more wines are basically the small parcels that I've kept for myself, really. So,
Nice.
or the ones that have shined the brightest during the ferment and post ferment. So basically what it allows me to do is I can pretty much keep that Antmore A plus, those wines consistent year on year, particularly on Sauvignon Blanc. I mean, that I can make that taste the same every year, irrespective of what the weather does, which, is a little bit of a challenge, but I think it's good in terms of the consumer sort of knows what they're getting every time. And that wine's been consistent for about 20 years. I mean, it hasn't changed a lot. And the style of it's always had a little bit of lees work, a little bit of barrel component in there for some palate weight. But it's also dry, and that sort of is a contrast to a lot of the wines that are coming out of Marlborough at the moment. Some of them can be quite sweet. It's under 3 grams in general, but it's not too crunchy. We haven't deacidified it. A lot of people have to deacidify. They're all made pretty naturally. So
Let's talk about sugar then. So, on average, what residual sugar level do most kind of New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs that we might get in the UK, what do they come in at?
A lot of the commercial ones are probably running 5 to 7 grams now, whereas ours is half of that. And I think what that does is if you don't have the best fruit, or if you've got a little bit of a grubby ferment, the sweetness covers that up. So it basically masks not a deficiency, but it can mask deficiencies or a lack of real fruit character. It's funny because people always say, "Oh, your wine's so fruity, it's so sweet." I get it all the time in the tasting room in the restaurant, and it's sort of, well, it's actually not sweet. It's dry. It's very dry. But it's got that perception of sweetness, which is just really the quality of the fruit shining through.
Yeah, it's got this really gorgeous, succulent fruit, really juicy fruit on the nose. It does make you salivate and think that you're actually biting into fresh fruit. Tell me a bit about the kind of the winemaking then. So you said there is a bit of barrel aging and lees work.
Yeah.
For your Sauvignon Blanc, the 25 that we're tasting, what is it that you do?
So basically what we do, we've got small parcels from all the different sub-regions. Some of we generally put a little bit into barrel, just looking for some texture. We have other ones where what we'll do is we'll take the lees from a couple of different tanks, and if it's really clean lees, and put that back through the wine, warm them up a little bit so it's just under where it'll go through malo, and then just lees stir for a month or two, just try and get a bit more richness and round the edges out. I mean, I'd rather not have to fine it or add anything to it if I can. So I tend to use the lees as my fining agent to soften off any edges, particularly when you've got the wine dry like that. And because we don't take the acid out, the acids can be fairly high. Not so much in this season. That was a pretty good season. So acids are quite a bit lower, but so it's really, and then basically it's assembled to try and get a balance of sort of risk. Fresh crispness on the front of the palate with a little bit of soft, smooth palate weight through the mid to a dry finish. So that's what we're trying to achieve, and I think we've done it with that wine. I mean, that wine looks pretty spot on for Marlborough for me.
Oh, absolutely! I love the really juicy character of the fruit, but also that nice kind of richness on the finish, as you said, and utterly mouthwatering. I know it's only 6 a.m. for you drinking wine, but it's it's 5 p.m. in the UK, and I'm pretty sure everyone's going to be grabbing something to nibble on after having a glass of the Sauvignon Blanc. I've got a question here from Mark.
Yep.
So when people talk about the 2 rivers in Marlborough, what are they referring to?
The 2 main rivers they're talking about is the Wairau River, which is the one that runs down the centre of the main valley. And then they're probably talking about the Arwitry River, which there's basically a mountain range, and you go over that, and then there's a big river that runs down the Arwitry as well. I mean, there's also the Waihope, but that runs perpendicular basically and feeds into the Wairau. but that's probably not the river they're talking about. They're talking about those two main ones. And so the Arwatry is a sub-region that's a little bit south of the main valley. You sort of go over a mountain range and then you're there. Totally different climate though. It tends to be drier, windier, colder. It's on the coast, a lot of it. My vineyard's very close to the coast there, so we, sometimes we get frosted, sometimes we get just really low vigor, low yields. So we're doing a lot of regenerative sort of work on that vineyard at the moment, trying to get the soil richer and more fertile, just using mulch and things like that to try and boost the soil, because it's a pretty harsh environment, that one, to grow in. It can get really dry as well.
Interesting.
So there's your two rivers. Yeah.
Super. Thank you. And let's move to your Pinot Gris. And do you pick different areas for the Pinot Gris, or can you grow Pinot Gris throughout Marlborough as well, or do you have a preference?
You can grow it everywhere. I've only got 2 blocks that I have Pinot Gris on. One's in the Arwatry and the other's in Upper Wairau. They're both very different. The Arwatry fruit, a lot smaller berries, very struggly little vines. The other one's got big vines, bigger canopy, really drives a lot more fruit. And we get 2 quite distinct components there, and then we sort of back blend from there. We also generally will put pressings to barrel, and then we'll use some of those for some texture. We often leave some of it in the press for a while and try and get a bit more extraction, and sometimes it throws a little bit of colour. This one hasn't, and I don't mind if it does. I mean, I've had some that are have a little bit of a salmon colour to them, but this one hasn't got that character. I think in the tasting notes that you guys might have, it says that the sugar is high, but it's actually not. So I'm just not sure what's on your tasting notes, but I saw that an email came through around that before. Once again, it's pretty dry. It's about it's under 4 grams, so it's pretty dry compared to most. A lot of Pinot Gris are coming out around 7.
And what do you? And then in terms of your kind of winemaking, where has your kind of north been for Pinot Gris? What are you trying to, express when it comes to Pinot Gris?
I've always steered, and this is from back in 2003, 2004. I've always steered away from the big, hotter alcohol, oilier styles. I mean, it just wasn't the way I wanted it. And I mean, I don't mind drinking those wines and from Alsace and so forth, but I just found them. I thought with Marlborough, with the acid that we get and the freshness, if you pick a little bit earlier, you've still got that, a bit more backbone, because it's not unlike Sauvignon Blanc. The Pinot Gris, the acid falls out of it a lot more, so you end up with, basically a broader, more flabby wine. So we try and pick some parcels quite early and retain some acidity, and then I use that to back blend in to make sure I've got the backbone to the wine that I want. So I've always made it in that fresh style, and I mean, I remember years ago, in like early 2000s, Bob Campbell wrote an article that was saying he tried them all, these ones in New Zealand. He said, there's a massive spectrum of them, but he said where we should be going is where the Ant Moore one's gone, because it's fresh and punchy, similar to Sauvignon Blanc. Go down that path and you'll probably be okay. And interestingly enough, I actually, in Australia, I have more accounts, on-premise accounts with Pinot Gris than I do with Sauvignon Blanc. It's always been that way. I sell more Pinot Gris there than I do Sauvignon Blanc in Australia, bizarrely. And we do quite a bit of starting to do a lot more in the US now too with it, which is interesting, because it's quite a different style to what they have there as well.
Compared to Oregon, you mean?
Yeah. Oregon tends to be a little richer, a little heavier, and then you've got Californian stuff, which is a lot hotter, and because Pinot Gris can pick up alcohol, which is, I don't really like it when they're 14% alcohol and they're sort of round and oily. We're trying to go the opposite of that. So you've still got freshness, but without the massive intensity of the Sauvignon Blanc.
It's I feel it's a very kind of, I know the word is overused, but it's quite a mineral style of Pinot Gris. This,
yeah, it is, and the ridge where a lot of that fruit comes from is quite a bony, hard site. It's got a big mineral pan underneath it, so the roots can't seem to break through that. So it does have a bit of minerality, and I think you can see sort of it's got the texture, but it also does have that fineness through the palate.
It's delicious. It's really also very mouth-watering and crisp. Obviously much kind of lower acid than the Sauvignon Blanc, but it invites you to have another glass. So one comment or question really, do you think the future of Marlborough is Pinot Gris?
I don't think anything will change from Sauvignon Blanc being the primary driver, and just because the amount of Sauvignon Blanc that's there, and also Sauvignon Blancs seem to be a lot more popular than Pinot Gris. It's funny, when we have like a wine festival or something, we've got the wines on display. The Pinot Gris ends up selling as much as Sauvignon Blanc, sometimes more, because I think it's just a bit easier drinking. But Sauvignon Blanc's what everyone seems to be looking for, so I can't see it changing, not in the near term anyway.
Excellent. Let's move on to your Pinot Noir. So, interestingly, you said that you're also a fan of Pinot Noir from Central Otago, but here we're tasting your Marlborough Pinot Noir. Can you paint us a little picture of Pinot
Yeah,
Noir
so
in New Zealand and how you see the different regions performing?
Yeah, so the two main regions that I get fruit from, and you can grow them in lots of other places too. North Canterbury's got really good stuff, which you'll hear from Alastair in a minute. Um, and then you've also got Martinborough. But Otago tends to be, it's further south. It's where the snowfields are, but at the same time, it gets really hot during the day. So you can have really quite robust. I mean, the Pinots coming from Otago tend to be bigger, more round, more fleshy,
Mm.
uh, and probably higher alcohols, even though Marlborough's a warmer place. And it's because it has high heat during the day, cold nights, and you can leave the fruit on longer, which gets it riper. And so you do end up with a probably more robust style. Marlborough tends to be a little softer, and this one's actually a pretty good example from Marlborough. It's got a bit more weight than some of the years that we have. I'm quite happy with this one, with the way the oak's shining through on it as well. It's not dominating. And so I get this from three different sites. Once again, one's in the Arbitrary, same place where the Pinot Gris comes from. The other one's on the other vineyard where the Pinot Gris comes from as well, which is in the Upper Wairau. And then I've also got some small little patches that I've got closer to the winery where we have a few little blending components. And basically, I make lots of small batches of Pinot Noir. We do them all differently. So some will have like extended cold soak, some will have
Mm.
post maceration contact. More and more, though, we're probably trying to reduce that. We're trying to get the wines softer. For me, I
Mm.
think Pinot at the moment, I mean, some of them I just thought they were a little too hard. The tannins shone through a bit too much. So now I'm really trying to get them more rounded on the edges. And to do that, I've basically had probably a little bit less extraction, so less time on skins, but you still want to have that colour. That this one's got a good colour. But yeah, once again, same philosophy though. Lots of small ferments, and then we pick the best parcels, and the better ones go to better and newer oak, and then we blend from there. And we basically select the best barrels. We don't make a lot of this wine. The Pinot is probably only maybe 1,000 cases for the world on that one, so not a lot. Be a few hundred cases for each country, but I mean we can make more, but I'd rather just keep it small and intimate. And then we do have an Otago one as well, which just tends to be bigger and a bit richer, and it has a bit more new oak, so because it can take more new oak with the structure of the wine.
Yeah, there's lovely kind of slight oak spice coming through in this wine, like a couple kind of nuances of oak spice and exotic spices. But really, for me, this is really fruit dominant, and really shows that kind of beauty of red fruit that you love on Pinot Noir. It's
Yeah,
very appealing.
yeah, and I think. I mean, we're using a bunch of different clones. We're using a bunch of different locations. We keep them all separate. So I'd have probably 20, 25 ferments of Pinot, and some of
Oh
them are
wow.
small. They're only a ton or two. Some are 4 or 5 tons. So you've got a lot of blending components there. So it just allows you to really, you can pick, well, I want this fruit character. I want some blackberries and I want some earthy character. I'll get some from that vineyard. There's one just down the road from the winery here that gives you really sort of ripe cherries and things like that. So we put a bit of that in there so you can actually steer it to where you want. And the good thing is it's a multi-stat process. So you'll steer it along the way, and then even when it's in oak, you'll gradually be picking the parcels as you go that you think are going to make the final cut. So it's pretty good. It's good fun. It's my sons are working with me at the moment. They're learning how to make wine, and I always get them to make a Pinot or two each year. They just get a small bin or two, maybe half a ton or a ton. They got to hand plunge it and make it all, and then that way they can see what there's all the different techniques do, and they'll often compete. So they'll have the same fruit, but a bin each, and they'll do different techniques, and you can really see how it works out. So, yeah, it's good.
Nice. How old are your sons?
One's 22 and the other one's 18. So,
Excellent. So they can drink it at least.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Super. Fabulous. We have a couple minutes left with you before we move over to Alastair. So I want to encourage anyone that's listening, if you have any comments on the wines, any questions on the wines, please pop them into Q&A. So I have a question from Tracy, who says that it's clear that it sounds like you love experimenting. Is there anything new that you've planted, or is there anything that you're working on that you might want to share with us?
Yeah, I've got a few little projects on the go. I mean, we also make some Gruner Veltliner, but Chardonnay is the one I'm sort of. I mean, we've got really good Chardonnay, and that's something I'd like to do a lot more of. We've only got small parcels of it. I've planted two lots, but the new vineyard that I've just developed on the way to Picton has a small a Chardonnay vineyard on it, and it's got some Mendoza and then a bunch of other clones. And so we're really looking forward to playing with that. That fruit's coming in, might be today actually. So it's its first crop, so it'll be really interesting to see what it does. And we also make a bit of method, so we've got some bubbles as well, and so we're looking forward to that. Chardonnay will end up being used both in bubbles, so we'll pick some early, hand pick, and then use that for our bubbles base, and then we'll do the rest into barrel and try and make something sort of interesting with that. And we always really enjoy those. I mean, they're really small parcels, but you have a lot of fun with them.
Absolutely, it sounds fun. One more question here. So what future challenges do you see for Marlborough wines, or Marlborough or New Zealand wines?
I think probably the biggest challenge for Marlborough at the moment is that some of the larger corporate companies they've just let the handbrakes off and just said to people, crop at whatever level you want. We just want more volume of fruit. And so you've got some of the big commercial blends are really, they've sort of lost their way a little bit for mine. That's why they've sweetened them up to sort of make them look better. But some of them have been picked too early and they just don't have the intensity that they should have. And some of those companies have also gone into some areas that are probably a bit too cold. So they're not getting the fruit ripe ever. And I mean, Sauvignon Blanc's not super ripe in nature anyway. It's often, you'll often pick some of it a bit early because you want some of that really grassy acidity, and then you'll leave some of it late and you want that for tropical characters, your peaches and your passion fruit and so on. But some of these areas where they've gone and planted some really big vineyards, the fruit that I've seen coming out of there hasn't worked. And so it's a little bit of a worry that it could pull down everyone's perception of Marlborough if they're not careful. So, and there's a bit of that at the moment where they're trying to reconcile how that's going to work out. So it'll be interesting to see where it lands. I mean, the real shame is that some of the better growers and small old vineyards that have really got fantastic fruit are sort of almost not viable now because the bigger companies don't want to deal with small growers. So they're not taking that fruit, or they're really pushing them right down on price, which doesn't make it viable for them, which is a shame because that's where Marlborough was from these vineyards just down here. And it's a shame if those are lost, I think, because it'll just become more generic. And hopefully, though, for people like our wines, ours will stand out a bit more, though, which we sort of we're seeing some pretty good response to our wine at the moment. So, yeah.
Excellent. I think that's, part of the crisis that we're going through right now. It's really about communicating to wine consumers as well to choose, select more artisanal projects and independent producers and really support independent winemakers, but also growers. We are running out of time, but I just have one comment to share with you from Mark, that he absolutely loves the freshness of your wines, all really super drinkable. I absolutely agree. It's 2:30 here in Mendoza, so I'll definitely be drinking these quite soon. You'll have to wait until the evening, and you've got a lot of harvest to deal with.
Exactly. No, thanks a lot, Mark. That's great feedback. Yeah, it's always good when people like the wines. I mean, that's why we make them. We want people to enjoy them. So it's great to know that they're hitting the spot.
Absolutely, really delicious, and all showing very clearly the varietal character, but also your character, I think, and everything you've described about your winemaking. I think it really comes through in those wines, textural, fresh, and with lots of personality. So I'm going to invite Alastair into the room. and
Cool.
ask you to go backstage. Thank you so much for joining
Thanks a
us
lot.
at this hideous breakfast hour. But
No worries. Thanks, Amanda. Thanks a lot, guys.
Super. Alastair, welcome into La Diferencia. We might have to make this a little bit more Spanglish, the name La Diferencia, now that we've got New Zealand in there. But you have lots of experience making wine in South America as well, don't you?
Certainly makes
Ooh,
wine Mendoza.
super. Your audio just broke a little bit. If you can just perhaps repeat what you just said.
Yes. Good
That's
morning, good
better.
afternoon. Yep, is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
certainly I have
so
done a
you
little
were
bit of
saying that
winemaking.
you've made wine and you've been a flying winemaker, making wine in different parts of the world, haven't you?
Yes, I have. Yes, so a little bit different to a lot of other Kiwis have operated, and very up early on in my career, I spent a lot of time in Europe and then in Chile and Argentina as a flying winemaker, making wine for a UK wine company. So it was a fascinating time this was back in the 90s, so quite a long time ago.
Excellent. Can you tell us a bit, because we're going to be tasting your wines very shortly from North Canterbury. Could you, as someone, obviously Condor's portfolio is largely focused on the more Pacific wines of Chile. Can you perhaps give us a little kind of 101 on the key terroir differences between, North Canterbury, and let's compare it to our Casablanca, San Antonio, the kind of coastal influences we get in our more typical regions of Chile?
Yeah. Gosh, you're putting me on the spot there. But yes,
You're also master of wine, so I know you can do it.
no. What I think is fascinating is New Zealand and Chile, from a latitude point of view, are very similar, and climatically not too far apart either. And I was listening to Ant talk earlier, and very similarly to New Zealand as in Chile, we have a lot of different valleys, a lot of different regions, and each of them give a little nuance and a different difference to that wine style. So whether it's coastal or whether it's slightly inland from a Chilean point of view, from a New Zealand point of view, it's a little bit more latitude from north to south, and you get rain shadows or wind influence direction. So there's a slight difference. So the flavor profile from a Chilean Sauvignon, certainly, let's say sort of 5, 10 years ago, was probably a little bit more on the sort of lighter, greener, herbal sort of spectrum. And the New Zealand wines, the Sauvignons, tend to have a bit more punch, a bit more intensity, and perhaps a bit more drive. And that was perhaps, climatically influenced, and perhaps from the vine age point of view, and just sort of where New Zealand was heading. But the Chilean wines have definitely come up a long way, and I think that you can hunt out some fantastic examples of Chilean Sauvignon that you'd be confused with New Zealand and vice versa. So I think there's certainly a similarity, but probably New Zealand ones probably have a little bit more passion fruit and probably a little bit more texture and a little bit more weight. That's very much a generalization, but that's probably what you see.
Super. And if we hone in now on kind of North Canterbury, so Mount Beautiful, a pioneering winery in this region. Can you tell me a bit about the story of Mount Beautiful and why the family set up in North Canterbury, and how that's kind of developed since 2004, I believe.
Yeah, I know. So a little bit of background. I've been the winemaker or consulting winemaker to Mount Beautiful since 2022. However, Mount Beautiful, as you mentioned, have been planted and have been growing grapes and making wine for a number of years now. And the thing that really is intriguing is North Canterbury is a small wine region compared to Marlborough. It's 2.5 hours south of Marlborough, on the east coast, so coastal influenced. The main wine growing region is a little spot called Waipara within North Canterbury. Cheviot, where Mount Beautiful is 45 minutes north, and it is so and it is the only vineyard in that area. So the closest vineyard is 45 minutes away, and David Teese, who's the founder and owner of Mount Beautiful, he's a Cantabrian, and he went looking for a fantastic location to plant and grow grapes, and he was a true pioneer. So they did a lot of research, and they discovered the Cheviot Hills and the Cheviot region had a great climatic characteristics for growing, and the soils were perfect for growing grapes, and so they planted, and it was a big bold move to do that, and they didn't go small either. They planted 85 hectares of vineyard land and built a winery, all the classics: Sauvignon Blanc, Pinot Gris, Riesling, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir. But also, interestingly, there's a lovely, beautiful hillside that they planted some Syrah, Mourvedre, Grenache, and Marsanne on.
Oh wow!
And so you need a lovely hot summer to put that into the bottle. But they've experimented and trialed on a few other products because it's a little bit unknown as well. So climatically, it's as the seasons get a little bit warmer, you do see the fruit sort of ripening a little bit earlier than would have been the traditional, but it is coastally influenced. So there is always an easterly breeze coming through, which keeps things sort of somewhat moderate. And that, I think, is a perfect situation from a New Zealand point of view. We're a maritime country. Our wines are, very much in the moderate flavour profile, I guess. But we get that great intensity because of our warm days and cool nights and retention of acidity. So I think, what we're learning out of Mount Beautiful, the vineyard itself, just to paint a picture, is actually really beautiful. But there is a mountain. Yeah, there is a mountain called Mount Beautiful in behind it, and that's what the vineyard is named after. But the vineyard itself is set up on two undulating plateaus, which then fall into a big valley, and there's a lovely big built a lake in the middle, which is great from a sustainable point of view, and they've got wildlife in the lake there. But the vineyards itself aren't just that monotone flatness; they're all on this undulating platform, so you get this variation of flavour profile in each of the blocks. And I think it's fascinating, really, because it's not perfect in terms of making those picking decisions, but you get a real range and a real medley of flavours coming through in the blocks, which I think actually works really well. And then, listening to what Ant talked about, we're very much the same, where we pick by block, we pick by clone in the Pinot Noir perspective, ferment them separately. Similarly, we've got, we'll probably have 40 or 50 different Sauvignon ferments. We've probably got, 20 odd Pinot ferments individually, and that's picking by clone, by block. Some might be whole bunch, some may be, whatever it may be. So hand-picked or machine-picked, etc. So you're getting a lot of variation that's coming in, and I think the beauty and how we're able to operate is by keeping all these parcels separate. We're able to then go back at blending, even though we've sort of worked out what we want to do, go back to blend and then pick the eyes out of the individual batches for the particular blends. So so it's going back to the pioneering situation. It's bold, but I think there's a lot more drive around sense of place, authenticity, and where does the wine come from, and this is a really good example of it.
Excellent. Thanks for highlighting the kind of importance of blending within a single varietal as well, especially when you're making, handcrafted wines like this. So the first that we have is your Sauvignon Blanc. So perhaps do you want to tell us a little bit about the different kind of style? Because if someone, we're obviously doing the Condor portfolio tasting, why might we want to convince a retailer to have both a Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc and a Mount Beautiful North Canterbury Sauvignon Blanc?
Yep, no, for sure. And look, there is a there is a New Zealandness, I think, about our Sauvignon, certainly in the South Island, indeed. So, firstly, I think just from a vineyard point of view, what Mount Beautiful has, which is a little bit different to a lot of other New Zealand vineyards, is that we do have two different clones. We use a Bordeaux clone, and we have MS, Mass Select. Now, the majority of New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc is produced and planted with MS, the MS clone, which delivers a wonderful characteristic for New Zealand Sauvignon. But the Bordeaux clone, it's called 317 and 318. And it brings a slightly softer note to a little bit lower acidity and perhaps a slightly more tropical aspect to it. Now, North Canterbury is not as warm as Marlborough on a daily basis, and so they've started harvesting in Marlborough. We'll start next week, so we're probably a week or 10 days behind where Marlborough is, and so I think for a start, what we're getting is a slight change in flavour profile, and what I'm looking for here is building a textural element into the wine. And again, it's actually not too dissimilar to what they're doing in Marlborough, but you've got yourself a different flavour profile. We're barrel fermenting 5% of the wine. We're picking by block, fermenting them separately, aromatic yeast. And I've actually gone down the route of a dry style as well. So this is only 1.3 grams of residual, so it's very dry.
It's very dry, but it's
dry.
incredibly textural and almost creamy in the palate as well. So you have lovely richness. Can you tell me where that's coming from? Is that from is Lee's work, barrel ferment?
Well, so look, 5% barrel, and just for everyone out there, the 5% barrel is not to show any oak characteristic. It's purely about that textural element. So the wine is left in barrel, so it's all old oak, left in barrel for around 5 months, and I think that brings it. There's a smokiness, there's a little creaminess that comes in. There is that textural element, and I think one of the things that I'm discovering about the region is there's a salinity that comes into these wines, and we'll probably see a little bit in the Chardonnay as well, particularly in the Sauvignon. It's got this lovely saline, salty finish to the wine, and it's so salivating. And for me, when you drink these wines, it's like, oh my God, I need another glass of it, which is great. So I think what is it offering? It's offering a real point of difference. There's fineness. I think there's an elegance to the wine. The dryness often, some of the Marlborough Sauvignon Blancs can be quite ripe. They get the ripeness level early and very easily. And so while those are great crowd pleasers and very drinkable, the point of difference with this one is it's probably got a bit more refinement, a bit more elegance. It's probably a little bit more of a thinker's Sauvignon Blanc around what you're doing. And I think another really interesting point, just as a general term anyway, is that the Sauvignon is a great example of what, as a consumer that's tasting the Sauvignon, you are tasting what the winemaker has tasted as a grape in the vineyard in its purest form, really. So, we're going through the vineyard daily, tasting grapes and making that decision on when we want to pick. And I think one of the arts is trying to get that decision correct. And what you'll find is that if a Sauvignon Blanc is a bit tart and a bit austere, probably the winemaker has probably chosen to pick the fruit a little bit early. If it's a bit full and fat and flabby, perhaps it's been left a little bit late. And so one of the key arts of a winemaker is to try and preempt when that flavour is going to arrive and make that picking decision and pick it. And so having the winery on site means, and we've got our own team, we've got our own hand pickers and our own machine harvester as well, is that we can really dial in the time and date and when we pick that fruit. So, within picking, it's in the winery, within, there's a vineyard literally 10 meters from the winery. So we can be picking it and watching it come in and down. So there is some real benefits of having your own vineyard, your own system and winery. We can really dial in what we want to do. And I think just by keeping these blocks, different blocks all give different flavors. And I think that's the second art is actually then blending those together. And what I really like about this 24, so 24 was a wonderful vintage for New Zealand, it was a dream vintage, is that, we're seeing a bit of passion fruit. We're seeing a bit of the lovely tropical fruits coming in, but we're getting some dried herbs coming through. And there's a real medley of flavors coming through that's got, it's the wine builds richness in a bit of time. And so it is a 2024 vintage Sauvignon, but it's still incredibly young and looking really fresh.
And I love as you mentioned, these kind of different kind of nuances of, fruit, herb, stone spectrum coming through. I think there's a lovely savory quality to this wine as well. Matthew comments that there's definitely that saline quality coming through nicely on the wine. And we have a question here with Tracy. She says this is incredibly food friendly. What would you choose to have with it if you're cooking for yourself? Apparently you have to cook it, so that's a double question. What do you cook?
Well, the good thing is, Tracy, I do like cooking, so that helps. But we love our seafood down here in New Zealand. So scallops and oysters are just a real go-to. But a lot of snapper. We have snapper. We have blue cod, teriyaki as our fish. So any fish is a good classic cliche with Sauvignon Blanc. But I actually think just a lovely summer salad. You've got yourself some fresh pasta, prawns, those type of things. Sauvignon Blanc is great, and this example is it being dry, is it just works very, very well with certainly a fish that's perhaps got a bit of a sauce with it as well, just because it helps the acidity and helps drive through some of those sort of fruit flavors coming in. We're notorious in New Zealand. We'll sit on the deck and just probably drink it with some cheese and some olives and a packet of crisps or something like that. But
sounds perfect. I would do that any day. All right, let's move on to the Chardonnay. So here we have your 2023 Chardonnay. Can you tell us, this was one of the first grape varieties that was planted in the vineyard, or when did you start working with Chardonnay as Mount Beautiful? And can you tell me a bit about your process for the Chardonnay?
Yeah, for sure. So like the Sauvignon, the Chardonnay was planted back in 2004. They've actually planted, and it's all in clone 95. So just to be a little bit technical, clone 95. They've got a new planting that's probably in its third year of a combination of 548, and that's looking really good as well. So so look, I and again, and talked some a lot of good things about New Zealand, and he made mention about Chardonnay, and I think New Zealand makes wonderful Chardonnay. It really is good, and it's a bit of a hidden gem from New Zealand as well.
Yeah.
We're so well known for our Sauvignon Blanc that we, sort of things get sort of left on the side around perhaps some of the other varietals. But New Zealand's just got this reputation that is growing. I think that the top styles could be considered, Burgundian by mistake, and often they are. And they've got lovely bright acidity, lovely citrus-driven fruit, and that oak integration often works really well. And so I think that the New Zealand Chardonnay, if you do, as a group of consumers, if you do get a chance to see New Zealand Chardonnay, be it in the supermarket or high street chain or in a restaurant, do give it a go, because it is incredibly inviting. And this is I think is a pretty good example of what we can do. So a lot of people out there will be thinking, I don't know if I really like a Chardonnay or not. And so there will always be a Chardonnay that we can find that it works for you. Now, the question is whether you like a sort of a fuller bodied, richer style Chardonnay, or something that's a little bit more restrained, perhaps a bit more Chablis like. And then you'd sort of say, if you want a bigger, richer one, go to a warmer climate, California, or perhaps Spain or something like that. And if you wanted a cooler style Chablis, or even, the New Zealand style Chardonnays are a bit more in that more restrained characteristic. So what are we doing with this Chardonnay? It's handpicked. And again, being able to be close to the winery, it comes in pretty quickly. We put it across the sorting table. We whole bunch press it. We put a portion around about 15% of it goes direct to barrel. And that's in order to try and bring a little bit of what we would describe a little bit of funk and a little bit of intrigue into the ferment itself. The balance we press, go to tank, and then 12 hours later we take the whole volume to barrel. So it's French oak, 100% French oak, wild fermentation. Around 15% is new, and we're starting to use some larger format oak barrels, and I think just the larger oak format barrels gives a little bit more integration of fruit flavors. And so the fermentation itself is straightforward. We then stir the wine for around 2 months post fermentation, and that's just to try and build a bit of body, build a bit of richness. And so just sort of the picking process is definitely around that grapefruit, some stone fruit, some nectarine characteristics coming in, wanting to retain a really lovely natural acidity in that wine. And I think that and then through the winter, come spring, the wine will naturally go through the secondary fermentation, which is the malolactic fermentation, which is the conversion of malic acid to the lactic acid. And so in very simple terms, the malic is like a Granny Smith green apple tartness, and that converts it to the lactic, which is that milky, buttery, creamy characteristics which you can taste in a wine. So Chardonnay goes through that process. We're not allowing all of our barrels to go through that. So that again is allowing and holding a bit of acidity and a bit of freshness. And I think the North Canterbury wines benefit from keeping some acidity and keeping some, some elegance and refinement to the Chardonnay. But, this one here, it's got lots of richness, it's textural, it's nectarine, citrus savory, there's a lot of sort of oaky char notes in there. There's just so many different things going.
Matthew Francis comments that this is a fabulous example of New World Chardonnay. And I really agree with him. And everything that you say about these lovely kind of stone fruit characters is absolutely kind of singing in the glass. But I also really love that slightly kind of nutty quality, that biscuity, aroma coming through. Really makes it a very complex Chardonnay. I have a question here from Mark about, you mentioned wild fermentation. What challenges does that bring in winemaking?
So the challenges it brings is being able to get the ferment to finish. So we're fortunate that it's getting the ferment to start and then getting the ferment to finish. And what I mean by getting it to start is that when you use a cultured yeast, you can control it, and straight away you're adding it to a tank or to a barrel, and it's already in action, and you'll start that fermentation process. If you're going through wild fermentation, you're waiting for that to happen. So you're waiting, and so that the delay on that period can be anywhere from sort of 3 days to 5 or 6 days. And so that's a nervous period from a winemaker's perspective, is that you've got yourself a juice that's sitting there. You run the risk of a bit of oxidation, but then the moment it starts, away it goes. And then the finishing is that the yeast gets a bit tired and decides that it's finished its job before you've actually got to dryness. And so what you can end up getting, and you have to manage, is that you can end up with some barrels that still have some sweetness come the end of primary fermentation, and then they sit over winter with a bit of sweetness, and then, funnily enough, in spring, they will fire up again and they start re-fermenting. And so they're finished to dryness. So you do get there, but there's often a bit more work. But I think it's sort of that risk and reward situation, and I really like what it does to these wines, and I think that I just think that North Canterbury has got an amazing. The climate works so well for our style of wine, and I just think that Chardonnay is an absolute winner out of North Canterbury.
It was an absolute winner, but also I want to talk about another winner, because we only have a couple minutes left, so I want to talk about another winner from from Mount Beautiful, which is the Pinot Noir that we're tasting. So the 2022 estate Pinot Noir. Obviously, we know that when regions normally work for Chardonnay, they often work for Pinot Noir. Tell us a bit about how Pinot Noir performs.
I will do, but when you mentioned 2022, it made me think of a point is again, Chardonnay and Pinot are wines that actually do need a few years of age. And so whereas Sauvignon Blanc, often drinking it young is the way to go, Chardonnay and Pinot, a couple of years of aging, you'll see a wine in a better shape, more intrigue, more interest than you would do from straight out new. So I think again, if you're choosing a wine, a little bit of age is good. So this Pinot 2022 is a cooler year. It was a much cooler year, probably one of the cooler vintages that North Canterbury have had for a number of years. And so there is a bit more of a dried herb, sort of herbal influence coming through in the wine. In the more recent years where it's been warmer, we've left some whole bunch, but this in 2022, 100% destemmed and individual ferments by blocks. So technically, we've sort of used 3 clones. One is the 777. We use, what else do we use? We use 667, and then there's another clone called Able clone. And the Able clone is a very interesting little part. That brings a savouriness to the wine, and it brings an earthiness to it. At the 777, a lot of fruit, a lot of perfume. The 667 brings a bit of mid-palate weight, and the Able brings a savouriness, and it brings a bit of spice and kick into the wine. And very interesting story behind it. Very simple terms. A man from New Zealand called Malcolm Able, he was a customs officer, went to Burgundy, loved his wine, snuck into a vineyard, took a cutting, brought it home, sneaked it through in his gumboot. So its nickname is the gumboot clone or Able clone. He snuck it through customs.
He was a customs officer.
Yeah. This is back in probably the 70s. Planted it, and then a winery, Artarangi, Clive Patton, he worked there and thought this has got potential. So he took it to Marlborough and planted this clone. And the bunches are slightly bigger, but it brings a savouriness, it brings a structuralness that you often get in French wine, and it works so well. And so a lot of the great Marlborough Pinots are built around the Able clone. The rest of New Zealand has used Able as well. We don't use it as much. So this has probably got around 5 or 10% of the Able clone in the blend. But it's a classic story, and it talks a little bit about the blending. So this is pretty low. I think probably you would have picked up. There's not a lot of oak. I don't like wine showing a lot of oak, and so this wine is very integrated. It is a bit more fruit driven. There's lots of spice and fruit coming through there. So, but again, it gets it's sort of savoury, sort of textural chewiness sort of coming through from a wine. And I just think that the cool climate allows us to create some lovely Pinot as well.
Well, thank goodness for rule breakers, because that's a delicious Pinot Noir and a really lovely way to kind of finish tasting your portfolio that we're tasting today. We only have 2 minutes left, but I have a couple questions, and they're all along a similar line. So Rob and Fiona and also Tracy are really keen to know, what other grape varieties might you like to work with in North Canterbury, and why? And is there any kind of direction that you're looking to expand the portfolio, or different styles in which you're looking to kind of develop within the range?
Yeah. So one wine which is always notoriously hard to sell is Riesling.
Mm-hmm.
So again, North Canterbury, I think, makes some of the greatest Riesling out in New Zealand. They tend to be, the fruit is just so pure and so delicious that you all you need to do is just smell the wine, and you don't even need to drink it. But the acidity is common amongst all of the North Canterbury wines, and so you need to have a little bit of residual sugar. But the key there is just getting the balance right between the acidity and the fruit and the residual sugar. So I talk about sort of mid, off dry, sort of 10-gram residual sugar style Rieslings, but they are just so drinkable and good. So Riesling is a lovely wine out of North Canterbury. So if you do have the option to find North Canterbury Riesling, give that a go. I mentioned very briefly about having the Syrah, Mourvedre, Grenache, Marsanne in the vineyard. And while it's only a few rows, and 2024 was a great vintage, we did make some wine from these grapes. So I co-fermented them and just aged them in old oak. And it is a truly fantastic blend. It's unbelievably good. It's delicious. It's rich. It almost feels like you're back in the Rhone. And so I think if we can get these other varieties planted in the right location and have a good season and get them right, then there's no end of opportunity in other varietals. But really, New Zealand is sort of classically Sauvignon, Pinot Gris, Chardonnays, and Pinot Noir. In the South Island, North Island, you've got Syrah and your Bordeaux blends, but it's a bit cool for us to focus on those varietals. So, where do we go to? Pushing the boundaries. Do we try other yeast, or do we try picking styles or using oak? But I do think there is a real drive to, we talked again earlier about alcohol and alcohol levels, and how do we bring wines of a moderate alcohol, but with texture, with that flavour, with that still, that real drinkability to them. And I think that's probably our next challenge is how do we work our way through that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's a really nice note to finish on. I know that Aaron is struggling to come back into the room, so we might finish up with just us. But I think, Alastair, your wines and Ant's wines really did show us, this growing kind of versatility of New Zealand wines, that beautiful drinkability, but also the art that you've developed over time in terms of blending and really kind of honing in on understanding each parcel, each vinification technique, and each kind of clone, and what that adds to your single varietal blends, which have all been delicious and really nice, here to have a perspective from Marlborough and a perspective from North Canterbury, and two very talented and experienced winemakers to be able to explain that to us. So from my part, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you, Lee, for getting these wines here via England and Argentina, because I know my friends here in Mendoza will really enjoy trying these with me this evening. And I'll leave Aaron, who did make it back in the room, to finish.
Yeah, my connection is not very good. I don't know if you can hear me, but if you can, thanks so much to our speakers today. Thanks to Amanda for hosting. Thanks very much to Alastair for taking us through 3 fantastic wines from Mount Beautiful. And thanks also to Ant, who's had to leave, as I'm afraid. He's not going to rejoin, but Ant did a great job earlier as well, talking through the wines from Ant Mall in Marlborough. Keep your eyes peeled, everyone, for the next virtual tasting. We'll have another one coming up in due course, and we'll have details of that to share soon. Otherwise, Amanda, thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks for joining us. Alastair, sorry for getting you up so early. Thanks very much again for joining us. See you all next time, guys. Bye.
Thank you. Ciao.